We are ready. We will call the meeting to order at this point. The Board of Selectmen regular meeting on Wednesday, May 8th will now begin at 5:04 p.m. And just as a note, Selectwoman Andrea Urbano is participating remotely on the audio. I don't think we have a camera for her, but she will be on audio. So with that, we will open up with the first Selectman remarks. And I just wanted to bring a couple of things to everyone's attention. First off, Sophie Newjum has been selected as the winner of Woodbridge's first Selectman Youth Award for 2024. She's a junior at Amity Regional School. She's logged over 100 hours of volunteer work with the Assumption Church, the Jewish Community Center in the Greater New Haven, and Amity Pop Warner, Friends of the Library. And notably, she has dedicated herself to the Nicole Donzello Foundation, provided vital support for leukemia patients treated at Smilo Cancer Hospital. I will be presenting an award to Sophie on May 15th, next Wednesday, a week from today. And additionally, I also wanted to just bring up Woodbridge, just kind of do a wrap up on our Woodbridge Earth Day, which was this past Saturday. A week ago this past Saturday. We hosted over 500 community people, members of our community were here. We had over 55 exhibits with 3 farms represented. There were 9 food and beverage vendors, 7 musical acts, and an eco magician, which was a big hit for all the kids who attended. More importantly, the BRS, the Beecher Road School Green Team, collected hundreds of clothing items and rehomed at least 567 items in our community before donating the remainder to area charities. The Dog Pet Free Cycle collected and rehomed countless items. Religious organizations in town took in many donations in their charitable efforts to spread the word of where items can be donated year-round. We had a mattress recycling, which collected 26 mattresses in unboxed spring, over close to 1,200 pounds of mattresses diverted from our solid waste. The Lions collected 75 pairs of eyeglasses and 24 cell phones. Goodwill collected 11 crates of textiles and housewares. Take-Two Electronics collected over 1,000 pounds of printers and computers. Bay State Textiles collected over 40 pounds of textiles. And the Pro Shed did over 96-gallon bins of shredding, which equated to about 4,500 pounds of shredding. So all told, we diverted about 3.5 tons of waste that what would have ended up in our solid waste. We diverted those to other areas. So quite a success. The other thing I wanted to just bring up is on May 27th at 11 o'clock, we're going to have our Memorial Day ceremony. We've been having it for years, and it's been hosted by U.S. Army Captain and Vietnam veteran Barry Josephs, and our Woodbridge Police Department Honor Guard will be there. There will also be the civil historian and author Irving Moy, and for the first time we will have a female veteran lower the flag in the ceremony, and that'll be Army veteran Patricia Alonzo. So those are just some items for you to be aware of. At this point, we'll start with our next agenda item, which will be welcoming Superintendent from Beecher Road School, Vonda Tenza. Good evening.
Thank you for the shout out for the BRS, especially the green team. They worked really, really hard on that clothing collection. Short report tonight. We currently have, I always start with enrollment, we currently have 884 students, and we actually have probably 4 or 5 that aren't in that count yet because they're trying to register this week. Spring is often when we see an uptick. So just as a reference point, a benchmark, last May we had 866, and we're at 884. And this May, we're at 884. So we're up about 18 right now. So it's wonderful. We're thrilled with the growing enrollment. It does pose its challenges, but we want them all. This entire week is Teacher and Staff Appreciation Week, where we pause and give gratitude to all of our staff. Today we enjoyed a delicious homemade from scratch vegetable lasagna and salad made from our very own and talented Jane Roddy. It was delicious. Tomorrow, if you're free, please stop by, any of you. There's an ice cream truck outside. Both of these events were sponsored by our Board of Education and administrative team, and the other events that happened during the week were sponsored by our PTO, and the end of the week is a wonderful time when the children come in with flowers for their teachers. They could be yard flowers, they're just beautiful. We really appreciate our staff. And so tomorrow, if you need an ice cream, we're gonna be out front of the North Office, and we will see you there. Also, as a thank you to our staff, our first selectman, Mika, actually starred in our BS News. It's a video recording that's recorded once a week by our 6th grade students, and they interviewed him a little bit, and he had a message for our teachers, and it was played in every classroom. So it was wonderful. I did share a copy with him.
They weren't doing that when my kids were at school, so it's really a thrill to see the entire production, and compliments to those who really coordinate that.
Our
because
tech
that
team,
was-
and led by Jeannie Charleglio,
It was a
really does a
wonderful-
nice job with
wonderful
that.
thing, and,
Great skills for the kids to have.
And I appreciate having the opportunity to say thank you.
Absolutely. Also, a point of interest, you can find on our website, our air quality report is complete. I did post it along with an executive summary because the actual document is really long. But if you want the nitty-gritty details, it's all there. And it's truly a celebration of great results. And I think a large part of that goes to our town boards in supporting the funds that went towards keeping our school air quality processes and structures up to above state qualifications. So we pursued this on the early end of the state mandate, and we have excellent results. Vito Asparo has worked really hard to wisely invest your funds to make good decisions that are proactive, and not everybody's reports for their districts are coming back anywhere near as solid as ours. So you can look, you can see the whole report, you can see the executive summary, and I also asked Vito, and he created a PowerPoint that he shared with our staff at a staff meeting so that they would be reassured of the great data. So if you're interested, please look at our Woodbridge Schools website. As a quick aside, I wanted to give a shout out to Dwight Rowland and the entire crew that did the Bethany Woodbridge Little League opening ceremonies. I was there with Mika and the Bethany First Select Woman, and it was amazing. I've never seen such a thing in a community for baseball opening ceremonies. The BRS marching band led the groups in, and really it was extremely well organized and very exciting. And then also, just for BRS, we just finished celebrating Arc Suite 17, which was a themed celebration of the sun, kind of linked in with the eclipse this year. And all of the grade levels had beautiful artwork displayed throughout our school. It was incredible. Hard to imagine that June 11th is our last day. It's just a few short weeks away. So sometimes the days feel really long, but the year goes by in a snap. And our year is full of culminating activities, of which perhaps you will be a part of, and we encourage you to reach out. If you don't have anything to do, I am sure we have something on our calendar that you could come attend. Thank
All
you.
the future parents on this side of the table are like, we have enough.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All
very
good
much.
stuff. All good
It is
stuff.
all green.
Incidentally, Superintendent, I just wanted to mention that our Sustainability Committee is reaching out to different departments, and we'll be reaching out to the school with regard to the air quality, because we're going to see if we can get recertified from a sustainable CT perspective, and I know that's one of the criteria. So thank you for that. All right. Any other questions? Next item on our agenda is a citation to be awarded to Alan Rice and Judy Panagrossi. And indeed. I moved into town back in the 1990s. I've been in town for what I consider to be quite some time, but they've probably got 20 years on me in terms of just the store, and the presence has been, everyone knows the Amity Meats. And
I hope the next 50 goes as well.
amen, so do I. And Alan, I also wanted to recognize your involvement in our town as a town treasurer. So in addition to just being a stalwart as far as being a community member from a business standpoint, you've also given back to the town from a personal standpoint, and truly, truly appreciate that, and appreciate you both. So to that end, I thought it would be more appropriate. I don't know you as well as some of the other folks who have been here a little bit longer than I, so I did ask if Beth Heller, former Selectwoman First Selectwoman Beth Heller, former First Selectwoman Ellen Scalatar, and former First Selectman Amy Morella would join me in presenting to you, and maybe even say a few words if you'd like, in terms of presenting you the citation. We're trying to emulate that whole three presidents thing. So,
Just, I'm gonna push this table forward a bit and you guys can stand in front here.
Getting a statue on.
Face,
we're gonna have to work on that.
face this way. Face that way, okay. And I'm gonna get my camera there. Stand right there. You're taking it out that way?
I think it's that camera over here now.
That's for the cameras, but we can just, you can, I think for the presentation, you can turn and face.
So first, Alan, for your decades of dedicated service to our town and valuable contributions of the Amity Mead Center, which has provided our town with a sense of community as a meeting place, MEAT. Your efforts have enriched countless lives and left a lasting legacy that will not be forgotten. Representative of the citation. Thank you. Thank you very much. For your decades of dedicated service as well, and your efforts have enriched the lives of our, and left our lasting legacy that will not be forgotten. Thank you so much. With that,
He's just running.
I mean that in so many ways. So we moved here 35 years ago, and I was so unhappy. We came from a big city. There was no place to go, no place to meet people. And Amity Mead was like the center of town for us. Susan Jacobs couldn't be here tonight, but we would meet up there. And then you didn't have that little eating place. That was just the place. And so I just want to tell you a few specific things that we'll miss. Most of them we'll miss because of you. Susan is sitting shiver for the tuna fish. My husband Bob has told the whole world about the corned beef. Nothing compares, even in New York City, your corned beef.
Thank you.
And I have to say, my greatest luxury has been I could go in and say, Alan, I like a chicken. He says, cut up the usual way. I mean, where could you ever have that? So I just want to thank you. It's a great loss for us personally and for our town. You've just been so much more than
It's bittersweet for sure.
Yeah, so thank you, and we will miss you so much. Thank you.
There's a whole lineup here. There's three of them. I don't know, anyway. Put my back foot in everything Ellen said, plus I'm sitting shit for a people. I'm assuming dysentery, buy it, double baked potatoes. But again, our story is similar to Ellen. We came from Boston, big city, coming here, and I had 3 kids. Where do I feed them? I think you were my first, my last, and my everything. Always going there when I was first selected. Just right down and going to, we call it the Amity here. We're just going to Amity. I mean, everybody knew where we were going. And I'm just going to miss you terribly. I'm happy for you, and I can tell you retirement is wonderful. Go for it.
Trying to adjust to it.
You'll do it.
Not easy.
And you got grandchildren. If you want to make food for my family anytime home. So thank you for everything you did for the town.
Thank you,
Wonderful.
Ellen.
Appreciate you. We appreciate you. We're going to miss you terribly. I guess Amy's next.
No, the question is whether Alan or Judy want to say anything. Would you like, please?
Just thank you to everybody in the support of the community, supporting Amity now and myself. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was our pleasure to be part of so many special occasions and holidays for so many people. And my customers were customers and they were friends. We just had a terrific connection with a lot of people.
thank you.
We're gonna miss that.
You were like the neighborhood bartender.
Yeah, exactly. versa.
Thank you very much. And it's great that everyone was able to join us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Our next item on our agenda is our administrative assistant's report, our administrative office, assistant administrative officer report, which is usually provided by Karen. We'll give it a moment. The item on here is the proclamation of June 2nd as Gun Violence Awareness Day, and we have Sally Connolly, who has brought this to our attention actually, and asked if we would be able to make this proclamation. And to that end, Sally, I don't know if you want to say anything in terms of what this is about.
Sure. I just want to check, do people have a copy of the proclamation?
Yes,
Yes.
they have a
Okay,
copy of
good.
everything that you said.
Well, I've been involved in issues related to gun violence and gun violence awareness for a long time. And one of the things that Connecticut Against Gun Violence has been doing is they've all along, everything really began in 2012 and Sandy Hook, but they've really been advocating for us to have more safety measures around the use of firearms, and also trying to get legislation to make our communities safer. But what they've been doing in the last couple of years, so they've also been funding a lot of community violence, gun violence intervention programs. So it's a really good organization. I got interested in it really after Sandy Hook, as many of us were devastated by it, but also had a cousin who committed suicide with her husband's firearm when he was serving overseas, and it was an unsecured firearm. She had mental health issues. But it's one of the things where I got involved in, let's see what we can do to secure firearms, not necessarily get rid of them at all, but let's secure them. Because so many accidents happen, especially to young children, when they're unsecured firearms around. And this, really, the proclamation is trying to raise awareness around gun violence and what we can do, that it exists, and to really think about it in our communities to protect our community and to be aware of safety measures. So it's really pretty simple. There are a lot of whereases, but it really comes down to declaring June 2nd Gun Violence Awareness Day. And that's in recognition of a young girl who was killed several years ago. And her friends started a really campaign to have June 2nd become Gun Violence Awareness Day in her honor, and to wear orange as being the color that hunters wear to show that they are, please be safe around us. So anyhow, I don't know if you have questions. I'll be happy to answer any at all.
Any questions? Again, I say thank you just for
Thank
making
you.
making. Oh, go ahead, Andrea.
I'm sorry. If I could ask a question to Sally.
Who's talking?
Oh, it's the great
The-
Wizard of Oz.
That was very confusing. Hi, Andrea Urbano. Nice to see you.
I must need to update some settings. But Sally, I appreciate you sharing this with us and the work you've put forth to raise awareness to gun violence. And my question is, I wondered, and in your document, you reference mental health
Yes.
and well-being, and I wonder if you've thought about this day being an awareness day for mental health issues and the need to pay attention to and focus and better address the issues that so often lead to these violent events.
Yeah.
it's a good question. Oh, everybody always says that. It's a good question, but it is a good question. I think in terms of this, in terms of my interest in Connecticut Against Gun Violence, it's really raising awareness of the gun violence issue without mental health being only a determinant. I think I'm pleased that when I go into buildings, that I often see the signs for suicide prevention, and I think that's great to see, because I do feel it's something that needs to be paramount in our communities, and we really need to pay attention to, and it's one of the things we can do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
And
you.
I just wanted to make you aware that at least this year, June 2nd is Trails Day. And
Oh,
so
good.
every weekend, every first weekend in June is Connecticut's Trails Day. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. I understand the significance of you choosing June 2nd, and I'm not disputing that in any way, but wanted you to have that information.
Well, and thank you for having Trails Day. I use the Woodbridge Trails, and they're marvelous. And I don't think that detracts from it. I think one of the things when we're on trails, not this time of year, but being safe and in fact wearing orange,
Right.
and making sure that there aren't accidents.
That's exactly what I was thinking. It's a good day to wear orange when you're out there. So, did you
Yeah.
want us to read the proclamation?
If you wish to, I mean, I don't want to
How's the board feel?
require,
I think there's some things in here that folks might appreciate, so I thought it would be appropriate. Is that me to do it? Did you want to do it?
I can read, do you want me to read it?
Please.
I'm happy to read it aloud.
Karen, I think, talked to you about it, so.
Yeah. I've been working on that was, yes. So this is proclamation declaring June 2nd to be Gun Violence Awareness Day. Whereas 219 people were killed with firearms in Connecticut during 2023, the third highest number of gun deaths in more than a decade. Whereas firearms are the second leading cause of suicide in Connecticut and account for half of all gun deaths in our state. Whereas interpersonal gun violence in urban centers account for a majority of gun homicides in Connecticut and disproportionately harms communities of color. And whereas firearms are now the leading cause of death of children and teens in the U.S., surpassing motor vehicle accidents. Whereas health experts, including the American Public Health Association and the American Medical Association and the American Academy of Pediatrics, have declared gun violence a public health crisis. And whereas exposure to gun violence can change a child's brain development and lead to short and long-term consequences, including decreased academic performance, chronic health problems, substance abuse, and unstable employment. Whereas pervasive crisis response drills need to prepare students in case of a school shooting, create emotional harm, and whereas more than 80% of child firearm suicides use a gun belonging to a family member, and 3/4 of school shooters obtain the gun they used from their home or the home of a relative. Whereas abused women are 5 times more likely to be killed if the partner owns a firearm, and nearly 1 million women have reported being shot at by an abuser. Whereas 6 out of 10 firearms recovered at crime scenes in Connecticut in 2022 came from out of state, all from states with weaker gun regulations than ours. Whereas nationally in 2021, police recovered more than 19,000 untraceable ghost guns that are preferred by criminals, a 10-fold increase from 2016. Whereas this June 2nd would have been the 27th birthday of Hadiah Peddleton, a teen who was shot and killed as an innocent bystander in a park in Chicago, following which her friends chose to wear orange on her birthday because hunters wear the color orange to protect themselves. Whereas joining together, we can call attention to this public health crisis and signal our commitment to reducing gun violence in all its forms.
Now therefore, I, Mika Cardozo, along with the Board of Selectmen, do hereby declare June 2nd, 2024 to be Gun Violence Awareness Day in Woodbridge. And thank you very much for your involvement.
thank you very much.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you, appreciate it. Be healthy, stay well. Thank you.
You as well, thank you. Next item on our agenda is the Administrative Officer and Director of Finance report. Tony?
Thank you. I have a report through April of 2024. The result is a year-end budget surplus of just under $1.2 million. As you know, we have an allocation of $800,000 in our budget from fund balance, which essentially means that we would have a projected increase to our fund balance of about $400,000 at the end of the year. That brings us to just above 15% of our annual expenditures. We have some of the same items here. There's just basically a few major items that contribute to the surplus. First is interest income, which is just about $400,000 above budget due to the rapid increase in rates. Second is the town received additional funds in the State of Connecticut Revenue Sharing Grant, which is not anticipated during the budget nor guaranteed during the budget. It's basically based on how well the state does. And expenses, we have a surplus of about $30,000 due to the closure of the pool at Beecher Road School. There's a corresponding savings in recreation, but that savings will go to help pay for the cost of living adjustments that were previously funded in some departments. Therefore, we didn't have to transfer any into recreation because of the savings from the pool, which gives us more contingency. Building official, about surplus of about $12,000, primarily due to savings in part-time wages. Benefits is similar to last month. We have a surplus of about $100,000, mainly due to the restructuring of the State of Connecticut retirement system. And finally, Amity reduced our March contribution by $462,806.
So that reduction was our share of their surplus?
Correct.
How does that
It's
compare
about a
to-
third.
How does that compare to last year's? Similar? Do you know?
I think it was a little bit less, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
It's been as high as 600 and even 900 in 1 year.
Very good question is how will that compare to next year's?
Right.
It's not anticipated to be as significant next year.
So under
So-
this system,
Just like the
we're not
track.
as vulnerable to, when we used to have it as a revenue, we were more vulnerable to whether or not they had a surplus. Under this system, we budget fully for our contribution to the school, and if there's a surplus, it gets reduced. So,
Any other questions regarding? Onward?
okay. Funding requests?
Sorry?
Funding requests?
Yes, please.
Okay. The first funding request is 2324-21. This is a funding request by the Human Services Department it was in their capital budget for fiscal year '25, which was to help to renovate the space that the Child Care Center will be vacating. And Jeanette has reported that it seems that the Child Care Center will be moving out earlier than anticipated, and she has requested those funds to help renovate the space for some programming for her department.
Is there any certainty to that at all?
To
The
them moving?
child center moving out? Because I seem to hear conflicting reports in terms of where
It's
they're
not-
moving
it's
to.
not- Right. Is there a certainty to it? The only certainty I could say is that our lease expires on June 30th. That's the only certainty I can tell you.
June
Whether-
30th.
Right.
This,
No,
no, next
following
year, 20,
Yeah.
yes, okay.
So, whether or not they move out by June 30th or not, that's the certainty I can tell you. Whether they move out earlier or where they go, I'm
That
not sure.
addresses it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve funding request number 2324-21 of $20,000 to create additional space for the Human Services Department in the soon-to-be vacant Child Care Center.
Any discussion on this?
Well,
Guess I should have waited.
what happens if they don't move out? I mean, you think there may be some question about the move?
I just know that there is certainly some things that need to happen in the area where they're moving to.
Yeah.
That have,
That may not happen.
What I
in
could
time.
tell you is that we would put the funds in a capital account for the improvements
Okay.
and not use them until they move out.
That
they would
makes
still
sense.
be there.
So if for some reason they don't move out, or there's a problem, or, they want to extend their lease for some reason, we could,
Mhm.
we wouldn't use the funds until they vacate the space.
This is the same amount that they talked to us during. the
Correct.
capital
Same exact
Correct.
amount for the same reason.
And at that time, we thought, maybe it's gonna roll into the final.
Right.
one more fiscal year out, and it sounds more like they'll be able to use the money sooner.
Right.
And if they leave early, do they not do the lease payments, or?
That's a good question. I'm not exactly sure what the lease says on that.
Yeah, okay.
And whether we're gonna force them to make the payments or not, I'm not sure.
We will
We
keep
could
that
research
updated.
that.
Yeah, we can update that.
Right.
The latest information is that they are set to move. You know.
That's my understanding,
They
yeah.
had some issue with sprinklers or something.
Right, but
Right.
my understanding is that was resolved, yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay.
So we have a first and a second.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the motion? Passes unanimously. Thank you, Andrea. Motion carries. Thank you.
The next item is 2324-22. You'll see a common theme in some of these. This is for the library roof repair project that was discussed during the building maintenance capital budget. We reduced the capital budget, or eliminated the roof repair from the capital budget. As you recall, it leaks in a certain part of the roof, and we'd like to get that project started as soon as this request goes through. And so that is a request here for this budget.
I'll make the motion to approve funding request 2324-22 of $20,000 for the library roof repair.
Second? Any discussion? Is there any time frame for us actually getting the work done, Tony, once the money's appropriated?
No, the capital funds roll from year to year. They don't
Mhm.
expire. And I typically do a 2 to 3 year look back, and if the project hasn't been done, then I'll reassess that and maybe transfer it for another appropriation.
But in
there's-
terms of us starting the roof work itself,
As soon as the Board of Finance approves the funding request,
then
then
we'll get
they
it.
can start the work.
Perfect,
Yeah.
thank you. Any other questions? We have a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Andrea, carries unanimously.
Okay, the next is 2324-23 for $7,500. This again was an item that was requested in the police department capital budget, was to complete their S2 door security project. They have a electronic door system that they installed a few years back, and each year they add a few more doors to the project, and this is to complete that installation. There's a few doors internally that they want to secure with electronic locks.
I'll make the motion to approve funding request 2324-23 for $7,500 for the police department's door security project.
Second.
Any questions, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously, thank you.
The next is 2324-24. This is for $6,000. This is for funds in the center building. We have a shortage in the budget for our natural gas expenditures. As you remember, the pricing increased and we had to estimate. And this seems to be the only account that's going to be a little short.
I'll make a motion to approve the funding request 2324-24 of $6,000 to fund the shortage in the natural gas line of the center building budget.
Second.
Any questions?
Tony, do we track center building as a separate,
We do. For use, you mean
for
for
use
gas
of heat and
Yes,
electricity and stuff?
heat, and a bunch of things.
Is
And
it-
its inefficiency or lack thereof.
Yeah, because I know that's been talked about, and it seems that that's an issue, right?
It is a big issue for that facility. And we compare it to other facilities that are similar in use. We did that a few years back. We have to update that, but to see how efficient or not efficient we are compared to similar buildings of a similar type.
That was all part of the sustainable.
Right,
CT.
sustainable CT, as a matter of fact.
So there's a dashboard that we can log back into and see how we're doing.
So when you have that project, when you
Mm-hmm.
restart that, that's one of the items that you can do.
Sounds good.
There was another, did you upload that last time?
Yeah, we have to take the vote
Yeah,
on
we
this
haven't
one.
voted
Okay.
on this one yet.
Yeah.
Any other
Yeah.
questions, comments? All in favor? Passes unanimously.
Aye.
Thank you, Andrea.
Just listen to all that last one.
Yep.
Thank you. The Human Services Department has requested $4,200 for a shortage in their general professional services line, which is where they fund the luncheon program for the senior center. The price of the meals was increased mid-budget year, and so they don't have enough to finish the year out. And so I know she's looking at other options to see what other options are available. The price increase, I think she said there's another price increase coming, so she's looking at what other options are available for the senior center for next year. So this will help us get through this year.
And Tony, this is a transfer
Within her department, correct. It's a
Line item.
line item
Line item
transfer.
transfer.
Right.
I'll make a motion to approve funding request 2324-25 of $4,200 to fund an anticipated shortage in the general professional services line item of the human services budget.
Any questions, comments?
Tony, I don't know if you know this. The only thing I didn't understand about the memo was the line that said all new costs have been offset
So
by.
she increased the price of the meals to offset some of the cost,
Oh, but not all.
but not all of it. Right.
Okay. I guess that's why I was confused.
Yeah, yeah.
So going forward, the plan is to offset with it.
Right, and to also to look at what other options are available now that the price has gone up and is gonna go up again, based on what she gets versus how much it costs and all that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Andrea. Motion carries. Thank you. Next item is the Town Planner Bid Award.
So we went out to RFP for town planner, and we received 2 responses, and we've interviewed both firms. Just pulling up the information here. And
You can speak to it if you want.
yeah, I just will set up this situation. And one firm was a more of a national firm, and one was a local firm called Goldman in York. And
The national firm is a firm, it is what it sounds like. They have a lot of experience in all different places throughout different states within United States. However, they don't have a significant presence. They haven't had a lot of experience specifically here in Connecticut, particularly as compared to Goldman in York, who we're recommending here, who has considerable experience, and this is where there's a focus here in Connecticut, and they've done quite a bit. So from an experience standpoint, from an availability standpoint, from a responsiveness standpoint, we felt that Goldman in York was definitely the way to go in this particular instance. Both did a nice job in terms of what they could provide, but we felt the local Connecticut firm was more the better choice in this case.
And the national firm had more virtual
Correct.
communication as opposed to someone actually coming here. And they were both roughly the same amount in terms of cost.
It is a consulting, part-time consulting type of an arrangement, and it includes about 24 to 32 hours a month of time. The agreement is for us to progress on a monthly basis, so we don't have an annual contract. If you work it out, it comes out to be about $7,200, $7,300 a month is what from a budgeting standpoint, we have enough money in our current budget for us to get started with them right away, which is one of the reasons we'd like the board to consider this today. Then we've budgeted $50,000 in next year's budget for this specific purpose. Should we need more, we'll need to come to the board for additional funding if we feel this is something that's bringing a lot of value to us. but it certainly gives us enough time to work with these folks in a consistent and constant way enough to determine, you know, what we should do going forward. The feeling was also that we did consider hiring an individual, but there's a couple of reasons, there's a couple of things behind that, and that not the least of which is it's very expensive. There's not a lot of planners. There's not a lot of kids coming out of college with planning type degrees, town planning type degrees. So they're few and far between. They're expensive, and with when you factor in benefits, et cetera, it becomes something that we felt, particularly us just getting started with it and coming up to speed with it, we felt this was a better way for us to ramp up and determine exactly what value we can have. If we see that there's a lot of value, we can look and consider doing it another way.
And I would also add, the firm has, well, we'll have a point person on our project. They have a firm of different expertise in
Right.
different areas. So, you know, you can access their expertise in various areas of their firm based on, you know, what project we're on, or which you may not get with one individual.
Correct.
What is it like for them to, or how did they propose coordinating the other consultants in the different projects that we have around town? So we have Period that's working in our business district, we have our POCD, we have our economic development consultant. What is their role gonna be to coordinate all of those efforts?
It's interesting because what they really work on as a major part of what they do relates to economic development. We did talk to them very specifically because one of my interests is lie exactly in that. Can we have an umbrella, you know, individual in this case, or firm, consulting firm, looking at what we're doing from a more broad perspective and see how they interact? It is something they can and they would look at doing. Their intention or their main objective is to improve us from an economic development standpoint. So there is a heavy emphasis on that, but we did discuss that. It is something they have the capability for, and it is something that they would work on. POCD, they're very much aware of the fact that that's something that's going on right now. They'll play a part in that. They'll play a part in EDC. They really interact significantly with TPZ and the building committees. So they'll be part of that. My concern lies more in just the time frame on a monthly basis. But it is adjustable, and we're going to have to see exactly what we can do from that perspective. Only because in the beginning, in particular, kind of feeling it out, it's going to take more. And they understand that it might be front loaded and then kind of taper off, but they're prepared for that.
Okay.
They're offering us a great deal of flexibility. Is really what it boils down to, and that's one of the other reasons we felt we should work with them.
Any specific ideas about when and where you would start with their services?
I'd like to start as soon as June, in terms of, we probably, if the selectmen concur and we award the bid, we'll notify them, Tony and I will meet with them.
We'll schedule a kickoff meeting, we'll work it
Right,
shortly.
and just for them to come in and talk about what's happening, all the particulars, the specifics as to what's happening in town, and start setting it up exactly how we can do it. We would have them also attend, if we start in June, we have them, were we talking the June or July meeting when we?
June.
June, yeah, we were having them come in and represent to the board in the June meeting exactly what they do, who they are, and based on the meeting that we have, exactly where they feel they can make an impact. So I think in answer to your question, David, June is when we're looking for them to start.
Right.
In June the June meeting would be when they're introduced, if you will, and present to the Board of Selectmen.
And then they would
So
participate.
Mika,
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Andrew.
if I may.
Yes.
If I'm understanding correctly, there's not a specific deliverable we're requesting from this consultant as in a town plan, but they would function more as, I guess, just a consultant / a liaison maybe between the development of the POCD, potentially the country club master plan development, and some work that the economic development committee is pursuing. Is that correct?
That is correct, Andrea.
And if I heard Tony correctly, and I'm sorry, because I'm hearing you well, but there's some, you know, unclear words. So if I heard Tony correctly, we could choose, there are different people from the firm, we can consult based on the topic of concern.
So they have different people in the firm, for instance, one person who's an expert with statistics and research, and someone else who is, you know, a specialty is economic development, and we talked about different strategies for, like, you know, tax incentives and different tools you can use to increase economic development. Someone else may be a specialty, maybe, you know, POCD. And they just have various people that we can use, or support, more importantly, support us.
I'm wondering,
From a
we're pursuing a lot of consultants right now, and there's a high price tag associated with all this work, and I certainly understand the benefit of working with someone of this nature. But I also am wondering, just in the context of our budget and our ever-increasing taxes, if this is really necessary, at least at this stage, and where we're at. Like, couldn't some of this work be done by the person who's hired by the POCD? Like, can you help me to understand why this is really necessary? Especially when we're trying to stabilize or reduce our spending.
Most certainly. Certainly, we don't have the expertise in-house to necessarily, and this is a function that we had at one point in time here in town, and it is a function that most towns have. Certainly cities in particular, but even many towns. As far as value is concerned, Andrew, right now what we're doing, and you're right about the consultants, and I certainly completely agree with you on that. It's extraordinary what the costs associated with it is, what the costs associated with the expertise that sometimes is needed, what it is amazing. In this particular instance, one of what we see, what we don't have along the lines of what you were saying is we're working on a strategic plan which kind of gives us an overall objective of what we're doing. We're outlining some tactics. The strategic plan is something I should mention, is something that is one of the first things we would review with them, so they understand what we're looking to do. And one of the things that I see occurring here in town, and I think everyone recognizes, is exactly what you said. We've got a number of different projects that are going on, many of which operate on their own, without necessarily oversight as to how they interact and what it means to the other projects or the town from a general standpoint is concerned. So the expertise that this type of firm, or this type of the expertise that comes with this, is one that would enable us to identify particulars as far as what we need in order to offset some of the increasing costs that we have been seeing for years and years and years, and obviously end up increasing our taxes. So it's expertise required so that we can define a path that may be different from what we've been going and what we've been doing in such a way as to alleviate some of the tax burden, some of the expense that we currently incur, that we currently have. Does that help?
Thank you, Nika. And my final question on this is there expertise in this firm specific to renewable energy, green infrastructure?
Yes.
And some of these other things we're trying to integrate.
Sustainability, yes. The answer is yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And the other thing we'll do is I'll ask Allison to resend the actual proposal itself. Read it, take some time to look at it, and I think you'll appreciate exactly what value these folks can bring to us in terms of what we need and what we're looking for.
I think the huge benefit will be in coordinating all of the efforts to to see if there's overlap, to inform for each project to inform the other project. So it seems like their expertise lies in that, and I was very interested in the statistics, particularly, how they work on the fiscal and economic impact of, any venture we would want to do. I think those are, incredibly, that's work that we need to be able to move forward intelligently and thoughtfully.
I was just going to also chime in with regard to the strategic plan. I think maybe there's an opportunity to map in. We had touched on in several areas of the strategic plan the services of a town planner, thinking it would be a staff position. Now that we're making a decision, or we're about to make a decision, to go back and map some of the areas that they could be advising on, potentially saving money, and even trying to do an analysis of the kind of money that we would be able to save, especially with regard to some of these building projects. So we won't need a certain amount of services. And then I would hope, and this is something we can discuss further when we look at the strategic plan itself, to be able to have a goal in mind of options for how, once we get over the initial, we kind of have a backlog of projects that we might need services for. But if we're going to then kind of pull back and say, okay, now that we've got this all set up, maybe their expertise can guide us about how we then create a staff position that we are able to fill at a cost savings, or maybe a lower level staff position, because we got all the management and the setup done
high level.
by the professionals. So I would like to see maybe that in the strategic plan as the goal of bringing this consultancy on would be to then leave too, and not have like forever consultants.
That's a good point. Yep.
Agreed.
To that point, is there a benefit or potential to add, if the goal is to make a motion to pursue, the hiring of this consultant, could we add a kind of a term limit, so to speak? Or is that something we would have to play by ear?
No, we could indicate, for example, we want to keep them for 6 months, or we'll relook at it in 6 months. That, by all means, that's not an issue. It's more or less what we discussed with them in essence, Andrea. Anyway, one of the reasons they've agreed to not put us on an annual contract. So yeah, that's not a problem.
So tonight, is it to authorize you guys to come up with a contract that
Correct.
then would be?
Correct.
And is our motion going to be to authorize you to go ahead and execute the contract, or we
Yes.
don't need to see it again? We would just be saying,
Correct.
go ahead based on our feedback.
We're awarding the bid.
Okay. Well, so when we say awarding the bid, though, did they specifically give you like an end date for their services, or they just said month to month to month?
Initially, they
No
gave
end
us an
date?
annual cost,
Okay.
and in discussions with them, we identified that we might be better off if we did it on a month-to-month basis.
Okay, and that's our option, because we got these bids in, and
Correct.
we can change it to month if that's
Yes.
what okay. Thanks.
So I'll make the motion to retain Gorman and York as the town planning consultant.
I'll second the motion. We've had a lot of discussion on it already, but are there additional questions, Andrea?
Thanks for checking, Nika. No questions from me.
We will put it to a vote. All in favor of awarding the bid for town planner to Goldman and York? Say aye.
Aye.
It is unanimous. Thank you. Next bid award, Tony?
Okay, there's one more item, and that's the bid award for the partial roof replacement at Beecher Road School. We issued bids for the partial roof replacement, and we received 5 bids. This is a classic example of why you go out to bid, because the low bid was $799,000, and the high bid is almost $1.2 million. So we had a scope review with the architect, with Silktown Roofing, who was the low bid at $799,000, and with the school represented, school administration, and we went through the bid, and we are comfortable that they have the base bid is acceptable, and our architect has
And if I could add, we came in under budget and there was an option to choose different material that would have given us a 30-year guarantee on the roof as opposed to a 20-year guarantee, so they were able to opt into that 30-year guarantee as well.
Right,
Figure-
the
was it right?
30-year, yeah, the 30-year guarantee is in the base bid. If you look on the results, the deduct alternate, number 1, is what you would take off the bid if you want to go to a 20-year guarantee.
Wow. 10 years, 32,000.
Right.
Okay.
So I'll make a motion to award the Beecher Road School partial roof replacement project to Silktown Roofing, Inc. for the base bid price of $799,000.
Second.
Any additional questions or?
I did have a question. So this is the portion of the project that is being sent to the state for
Correct.
reimbursement,
Correct.
right? So once we execute on this contract, that all goes up through their portal of some sort and,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, and I'll mention along those lines, the building committee also recommends this bid.
Yeah, I see it in the document, yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? All in favor of awarding the bid? The Beecher Road?
Aye.
The ayes carry. It's unanimous. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we are at exactly 6:01, so at this point in time, we will open the floor up for public comment.
Thank you. Amy Morella, 184 Rimmon Road. I actually have 2 comments. One, just because of listening to you all, and I appreciate all the work you've been doing for the last hour. I feel, and I expect a number of people feel, that because in part of COVID and because of the workings of the last administration, things are happening that never really got fully vetted. And there are 2 examples. One is the community center, whatever it's called, and the other is what to do with the center building, which I understand it comes in at over $40 million, but never was presented in a way at a public forum where people could ask Lester questions. And then I add to that, to the concern people had about coordinating all these disparate projects, and I share that concern. I'm glad that there's recognition that we need to coordinate and among the different things going on, but I would ask that in addition to briefing on these things that are ongoing, you actually also brief on your strategic plan, because presumably that's an effort to figure out how do we move forward on all these things in a coordinate way. And I also presume that you're interested in the opinion of the people you represent. So it's my understanding there's not going to be any big presentation at the town meeting, but I hope that you will schedule something in the month of June before people start going away, so they can start to hear about everything that's been going on and is going to be going on and ask some questions. As an example, I have real concerns about planning space in the center building for human services to expand when there is this continuing question about what Beecher space needs are. And I just feel like, you know, until it's figured out what Beecher needs, everything else should be second burner, because that has to be our priority. Okay, so now what I actually drafted, and I apologize for having 2 thoughts. And I will give a copy of this to Allison for the record. This is my prepared remarks. I would trust that we all agree that every government official in Woodbridge, whether elected or appointed, should present facts accurately and describe the relevant law correctly. Unfortunately, the previous administration repeatedly mischaracterized the state's affordable housing law, claiming that the town has to meet a, quote, mandate of 10% affordable housing, end quote, when no such mandate exists. That misstatement, made repeatedly, is now thought by many in our community to be true. This administration is striving to do better, and I applaud you for that. It's wonderful. However, recent statements using the term, quote, open space, end quote, give me concern. For example, our first Selectmen's April report says that our town, quote, has one of the highest ratios of open space, end quote, in the state. I'm sure it was unintentional, but that statement is open to misinterpretation. We should not use the term, quote, open space, end quote, in a loose manner when there is in fact a mix of undeveloped land in our town, only a portion of which is legally and permanently protected open space. When it comes to affordable housing, there is an important distinction between housing that is priced affordably and is referred to as naturally affordable, and housing that qualifies in law as, quote, legally affordable, end quote. Similar distinctions exist when characterizing undeveloped land, and those distinctions are just as important. If we are going to be precise in our definition of affordable housing, we should strive for the same level of precision when characterizing undeveloped land as open space. Kathy Wick will offer more information regarding the different types of undeveloped land that exist in our town. I would like to turn to a specific example in which using the term, quote, open space, end quote, for a parcel matters and requires careful application of the relevant law, which I hope our town council will address. CUPOP, the Commission on the Use of Publicly Owned Properties, has been reviewing all town-owned land for public sale or change in use. 31 Enoch Drive was purchased by the town in 1999 using open space bond funds and includes an important section of public walking trail. So why is CUPOP considering a recommendation to sell this land? I have heard that the property's purchase with open space bonds doesn't limit its future use because the bondholders have been fully paid and the bonds expired. But the relevant question isn't about the bondholders or the bonds. The relevant question is, what is the town's legal and ethical obligation to the town residents who voted to approve and paid for that bonding for a specific open space use? Our town council should look at our government's obligation to respect the purpose for which this land was acquired, as understood by those who authorized the borrowing for its purchase. If this parcel, and others like it, can be sold absent a perpetually binding conservation restriction, then the land should never be called, quote, open space, end quote. Words matter. We shouldn't use open space to characterize undeveloped land unless it is legally and permanently protected from a change in use. Thank you, and I do hope you will research that because it is a concern of considerable note among quite a few people who have come to CUPOP and others who've spoken to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
As Amy mentioned, Kathy Wick, 181 Rimmon Road, right across the street. As Amy mentioned, I'm going to follow up a bit on a few of her remarks. There's a widespread misperception among town residents, which was actively promoted by past administrations, that Woodbridge has ample open space and doesn't need more. Our state government policymakers would surely disagree, since over a decade ago, the Green Plan set a land preservation goal by state law that has not yet been achieved. The state DEEP needs to protect 57,000 more acres, and towns and nonprofits need to protect 100,000 more acres in order to reach that statewide goal. The source for those numbers is the Connecticut State Open Space 2022 annual report. Referring to the recent statement in the First Selectmen's newsletter that Woodbridge has one of the highest ratios of open space in the state, I would actually request, I'd like to have the source of that assertion, since I've searched and been unable to find any such published list. And I'd like to look into how open space is defined, if there is such a list. More important, though, is how we define our terms. And I'm going to, a little bit more detail on what Amy was talking about. What do we mean when we say open space? I agree with Amy that when we talk about open space, we must restrict our definition to those lands that are legally and permanently protected. While previous town leaders have blithely asserted that Woodbridge has 1/3 open space, in fact, according to the town's Plan of Conservation and Development, the POCD, only 6% of the town's land area is legally and permanently protected by the town itself. Many people assume, for instance, the Fitzgerald Tract is protected and refer to it as open space and think of it that way, but it actually has no protection whatsoever. The Woodbridge Land Trust and Woodbridge Park Association together own 3% of the town's land area, and the state owns 1%, for a total of 10% of the town legitimately categorized as protected open space that is accessible to the public. That accessibility is an important issue because the POCD also lists the Regional Water Authority as a major holder of protected lands in Woodbridge. But these lands are very different from those just mentioned. The RWA lands are divided into two classes, only one of which is permanently protected. The RWA Class 2 lands in Woodbridge, which number over 1,000 acres, could be sold. There is precedent for this in relatively recent history, in that the Racebrook Tract was previously owned by the Water Authority and was purchased through a collaboration among Woodbridge, Orange, and the state of Connecticut. The 800 acres of Class 1 RWA land in Woodbridge are permanently protected, but they are not recreational lands fully accessible to residents. There are very few walking trails, access is restricted to permit holders, and no dogs are allowed at any time. The purpose of these lands is not to benefit Woodbridge residents, but rather to ensure clean drinking water for our city neighbors. While these acres reside within our borders, they are a regional asset. To summarize the land tally, just 10% of Woodbridge is legally and permanently protected land fully accessible to the public. Another 7%, the Regional Water Authority Class 1 land, is legally and permanently protected but not fully accessible. This is a very long way from the vague 1/3 open space claim made by previous town leadership. As we begin the process of revising our town's POCD, I would like to emphasize the importance of defining our terms carefully to ensure that we are comparing apples to apples, oranges to oranges. It is also essential that any and all assertions made be supported with citations of independent data. Only in this way will we produce town policy with the legitimacy that citizens can trust. Thank you.
If I might ask, was there any criteria by the state, the report that you mentioned, in terms of targets for each town?
No, the green plan is very much a statewide plan recognizing that towns are very diverse in Connecticut, and some towns, like Woodbridge, do have the ability to conserve more open space, and obviously the city of New Haven has very little ability. There's an overall goal of 21% for the entire state, but given that the cities can conserve basically zero, the small towns that have the ability to conserve more have to make up the difference.
And just for learning purposes, from my perspective, if I might ask, Fitzgerald Tract being a very good example, what would you call it? If you don't call it open space, I'm just curious what term you would use. Open space.
It's undeveloped land.
Okay.
Yeah. Municipally managed undeveloped land, but
not legally protected.
But not legally protected, no
So
protections
normally,
whatsoever.
the distinction, I just, because I've tried to be careful in terms of when I say this, I say open space and restricted open space is what I use.
Right.
Meaning that there are very specific rules again, or how you can do certain open space.
Right.
But for purposes of clarification, I
Right.
use open space from a generic standpoint because it's open and it's space.
Yes.
Not meaning that there's a particular definition for open space. If there is one, I'm not aware of a industry definition for open space. So I try to make the distinction in terms of adding a word to distinguish between the two of saying
Well, I would
one
say
is restricted and one is not.
perhaps unprotected open space you could call,
Good way to put it.
Fitzgerald,
Right.
because
It's
I do
hard not to
know-
use open space.
I do know
guess what I'm
that
getting
most
at.
people assume when you say just open space, that there are protections there and that it is,
I've never made that consumption.
Okay.
I say, so when you say most people, I'm not sure if that's the case, only because I've never made that assumption. Maybe because I'm closer to the town and understand that there are different types of open space.
Right,
But,
right.
but I've not had anybody come to me and say, well, be that as it may. But I
Well, I do-
understand your point and I appreciate it.
I mean,
And
do
I'm
you-
only asking because I want to make sure as we go forward, we learn and we.
right, no, I appreciate that. And I mean, have you encountered the misperception that Fitzgerald is protected?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm sorry, no, I have. In
You
other
have.
words, where people think that it's.
People think it's protected.
It's well, yeah.
Right, and maybe that's because it's referred to as open space and not a more precise language. So that's my point. I think
Unprotected open space
we're gonna
works
be
for me.
having
I
a lot of
appreciate
these
that.
conversations as we go through the POCD process, and I think it's very important that people understand the differences, and there's even in the POCD, they include 490 lands as
That's what I was
in
just
the
gonna
open space
say.
chapter, and those are not at
So-
all. I wouldn't consider those. My property is 490. I don't consider it open space.
Right, they have a little asterisk there. I actually have, it's page 91 of the current POCD.
Yeah.
And I think that as we go forward, if we conform very tightly to what was reported 10 years ago, and then compare it to what is currently happening, because those numbers have all changed. Every one of them has changed. But the way it's broken out there, if we just are very careful to use the same language
Yeah.
as we start the next POCD.
I appreciate it. That sounds good.
If I could, I just want to add
Please.
2 things. To your specific question about towns, I was saving it for next month. But
I hope you get up
back in
there. Go ahead.
2016, I had a concern about the POCD. And as the former commissioner of DEP, now a resident, I wrote to the then current commissioner of DEEP, Robert Clay, who is now our town planning and zoning commission chair and no longer with DEP. And I asked him, your draft, the draft in this town says, for the POCD, says that we're beyond what our requirement is. I will get you the exact letter as to what it said. But the draft was awful. Claimed we had too much open space because we were above 11%. And he wrote a letter making clear that it is not per town 11%. It is an overall goal, and some towns can do more, and some
Makes sense.
obviously will never achieve 11%. So it is a goal for the state as a whole.
Appreciate it.
And I will give you that letter and also present it publicly in June. The other thing I was just going to say is the term open space was used a lot when we were doing bonding for acquisition. And so at least among those of us who were active in the acquisition process, I was then on the Conservation Commission, when we referred to open space, when we were advocating for open space bonding, we assumed anything referred to as open space was protected open space. Hence my concern about what's happening with Enoch Drive, because I do think that that was the basis on which people authorized the bonding.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification. The only other point I did want to make is regarding the Regional Water Authority property and the 2 classifications. If I'm not mistaken, and you can certainly, I'll verify this, but if I'm not mistaken, yes, it can be sold, but it can only be sold to another water company, or the town always has a first right of refusal on that property. So it's not as if it could be sold to a developer, because it has been at
But
one
if-
point in time part of a watershed.
Right, so first right of
So-
refusal, but if we don't have the money to do it,
Yeah.
for some reason we can't bond, then it is
Well,
on the
it's
open
still,
market.
there still
Yeah.
are restrictions. I think there's very specific
There's a
language in there.
process that needs
There's
to
very
occur.
specific language in there that indicates it can't be sold to a developer, or
I
something along
think, I
those
think it
lines.
cannot be sold in the first instance to a developer, but certainly when we were making the effort in town to purchase the Racebrook track, it was with an understanding that we didn't just have the opportunity to sit back and say, you can't do anything with it.
Yeah. I
We had
understand.
to pony up the money.
Sure.
And we sought funding from the state with the conservation restriction that comes with state funding in order to prevent the potential for development. So it is, yes, it is a multi-step process. But
right.
the bottom line for them is they don't need it for water shed protection. That's their updated determination. Or maybe, I don't know, there may even be a fiscal basis for doing it. But then they don't have to hold on to this land forever.
Thank you. Thank you for indulging.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
David, please.
Ask questions.
I know, you're right, but I did open it up and I just
So I would
I wanted clarification.
I would only like to ask about the green space target for the state.
Yes.
Is that protected green space as opposed to, well, it's open, but we're gonna sell it next year, so it's gonna go away?
No, the green plan, is for protected, legally protected open space, yes. So, total.
Sounds pretty hard to meet.
157,000
met it.
acres yet to be protected, statewide, to
Okay.
achieve the goals of the green plan.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Our next item is our strategic plan update. And I will, I'm sorry?
Town council,
Oh, I'm
and just
sorry.
give town council
Ah,
report
you
for
do.
public comment.
Town council. Sorry, Nick.
No worries.
So,
Okay,
Nick, I'm sorry, just interrupting. And as was indicated, David, ordinarily, we don't go back and forth, but we can if there's some clarification points. So I did feel like I just wanted to clarify particularly the definition because I do use open space as space that's open. So, thank you.
And that was my question as well, so thank you for asking.
Well, as long as we were asking questions, I thought
Let's get it in there. Thank you, Nick. We are now on that.
why don't you take one and pass down, please? So my report is just really gonna focus on one item, which is I understand at the last special meeting, the board had made certain appointments to the Beecher Road School Infrastructure Upgrade Building Committee contingent on a written opinion from the town attorney's office confirming that an appointment of a non-resident to the committee is in fact permissible and legal. So in front of you, I've prepared a relatively brief, and Andrea, I don't know,
I
Allison,
can
you.
email her a copy right now.
Okay.
Andrew, can you access your email?
I can, thank you, Allison,
Of
I
course.
appreciate that.
I mean, the long and short of it is, yes, in my opinion, this board can appoint a non-resident to the Beecher Building Committee. It turns on the language used in our charter as well as state case law from our appellate court, which basically confirms that where a charter expressly uses multiple terms to define governmental bodies, okay, just generically. Ours, for example, uses terms like boards, commissions, agencies, and offices as well. And those are used multiple distinguished times throughout the charter. And that means something. At least our courts have held that means something because there's a purpose to those specific words that are used. So here, the only real possible impediment in our charter I would see to appointing a non-resident for this specific purpose. I'm not saying this applies across the board to any appointments. I'm saying this is what applies to this specific committee right now. And the only potential impediment, as Selectwoman McCrevin pointed out to me, is in section 7.6 of the charter, which does clearly state that uncompensated appointed boards, and that's significant here, I think, boards are to be electors. And an elector is you're over 18, you're a U.S. citizen, and you live in town. I don't think that applies here because of the rationale that I just explained. This isn't a board, in my opinion. The Beecher Building Committee, under our charter doesn't use the word committee anywhere, but the only interpretation that I can make of what this Beecher Building Committee is under our charter is an agency. It's not a board. So I'm not compelled by 7-6 as precluding this board from taking a non-resident who this board feels is professionally and substantively appropriate for whatever the input's going to be. And just to buttress that, there's an additional sort of more baseline even authorization to the Board of Selectmen that when it does in fact create these bodies, these agencies, we'll say, such as the Beecher Building Committee, it has the express charter-based authority to determine the qualifications of office. So the board gets to decide what the eligibility of membership is for these entities that it creates, whether it be giving these entities a power to actually make decisions on their own, or whether they are purely advisory in nature to this board. So that's really the long and short of where I'm at on this. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you. The vote of the board was to recommend that the teacher be put on the board, and it was contingent upon the written notification. So I believe with this written notification, we have what we need in order to move forward with the teacher being part of the teacher board. So
Yeah, and just in, you said the ability to determine, the agency with which that they're on the board, and she's acting as a representative of the teachers and the school on the board. So in that capacity is what
Yeah, I don't see any conflict with that. Actually, I'll just point out as well, Selectwoman McCraven also brought to my attention, well, look, if in the future this committee, which I understand at this point was originated on the Board of Ed side, and then we sort of reformed it and recharged it here, and in the future, maybe it's actually going to be applying for school construction grants. So we want to make sure that we crossed all our T's and dotted all our I's with respect to who's calling the shots on this committee, even at this stage of the game where this committee that we formed here might not technically fall into the state law definition of a school construction building committee. And even if it gets to that point, there are no statutory restrictions that speak to eligibility, that you need to be a resident. It's really left as a matter of local concern, and I've consulted with several of my partners who represent probably 20 boards of eds across the state, and I do have a reach out to the state, whatever the department is that issues grants, the branch that does the school security stuff, or school construction grants. I'm waiting to hear back. I'll just confirm with them, but I feel strongly confident that we're good to go here, and this isn't going to come back to bite us in the future.
appreciate it. Thanks for being so thorough.
I do have one question for you. I don't know if you were able to, subsequent to our conversation, I had sent you the minutes of the ordinance committee from last April, the 26th, 2023.
I did see those, yes.
We had a very similar question. It was actually asked by someone who's still in our audience right now, with regard to ad hocs and committees that are not set in ordinance, not standing commissions or things that are either in our charter, in state statute, or in our ordinance. What was the rules for ad hocs? And we did have a summary of that in that meeting. The town council at the time did say that all these rules, including members must be electors, apply. So I appreciate your new opinion that we just received. I don't know how we sort of square that with what is previously out there stated as the opinion of the previous town attorney. I think that will likely be back to us because we have a lot of ad hocs. It's possible that we'll entertain motions to add more people who either aren't electors or aren't, the minority party rules, the filing of minutes, the agendas, all of that. So I I appreciate this component, and I just feel like we're probably gonna need more, to undo what's in our previous minute.
Well, you're certainly welcome to your opinion, Selectman McCrevin, but two things.
I'll ask in the future when it actually comes to us, because we don't
Well,
have.
sure,
a question before us.
I'm happy to answer it the same way as I'm gonna now. But, two things. Number one, attorneys can have differing opinions. Number two, that's not actually what Attorney Weiner said. If you look at the minutes, his comments, at least as they were represented in the minutes that you're citing, speaks to ad hocs that are set out in our local code as ordinances. This beach or building committee is not. So I think there's a distinction in what you're pointing to there. And from my perspective, there is no conflict in what we're saying.
Okay, that's, he does say ad hocs at the beginning of the sentence, but.
If you continue to read the minutes, I think in the appropriate context, you could see he's speaking to those set forth by ordinance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe that it's closed at this point in time, and we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is indeed the strategic plan.
Great.
Thank you.
So we did meet a couple of times since our last meeting. We are still working on finalizing a draft. I think what we talked about at the last meeting was that we would like to have that ready in advance of the June meeting of the Board of Selectmen, so that we could make that draft available to really take a look at. One of the components that still needs to be put into place, and we touched on it briefly earlier this evening, is we had noted town planner here, town planner there. We have a list of active building projects. So right now we have placeholder text in there, so clearly we need to have more information. My understanding is the Center Building Committee has asked us, as members of the Board of Selectmen, to attend the Board of Finance meeting on, I believe it's the 16th of May. So I'm hoping to get a whole bunch of additional information about where they currently are with planning. They had come to the previous board with a, I think, 5-phase plan, but we were not in a position to authorize it then as the previous Board of Selectmen. I don't know that we'll particularly be able to authorize anything coming up on May 16th, but at least we will have a sense enough to put into the strategic plan exactly what we think is going to happen. And again, the strategic plan is meant to guide the work of the Board of Selectmen and be a living document and be updated as we go along as things happen. But it's meant to kind of guide what we can do in our terms of our elective office, which are not as long as something like the Plan of Conservation and Development, but would be helpful, especially in regard to the funding of projects. So with that in mind, I think that it's important for us to take a look at the impact. We have several new developments since January that are going to have budgetary impact going forward. And I think that the strategic plan should help the public understand how it is we're going to use these resources. They are, after all, the public's money that we are spending. So looking forward to more discussion of this in June, and hopefully if we all agree that it's ready to be finalized, if we could finalize it in June. That doesn't mean it stops being adjustable. Certainly hearing from the public what they think of it, but I feel like we have to have it together to tell them what it is before we ask them to give us input.
As Sheila indicated, the intent is to give it to the Board of Selectmen, to give it to the Board of Selectmen for your review and for your input. And then, obviously, we can discuss that input in the review at the meeting. We can't do it before then unless we have a special meeting. So it is something that you should take a look at, identify what you feel might need to be changed, added, adjusted. So one thing I'll say is probably we're looking at July for the final document to come out, because if we discuss it on we could do it. If there's not a lot of changes, we could potentially do it. The sooner the better. The intent is for us to have something that can guide us, and we want to do it in such a way that includes, right from the agenda standpoint, understanding on the agenda what items we're working toward as far as the strategic plan is concerned. So, and it is something that we want to make sure the public is aware of, so they understand what it is we're looking to accomplish as well, and provide them through public comment an opportunity to comment on it as well. So we're really close. I think it's a great effort, and I appreciate, and I can tell you we're able to do it in a shorter time frame than we probably would have due to the work that Sheila and David and Tony have put into this in the past. So it's, you'll see something prior to our June meeting.
Yeah, and I wonder, and this is maybe a legal question as well, if other members that are not serving on this committee want to attend this meeting and be part of the conversation. These are public meetings, and they'll be publicly noticed. Maybe we can go out of our way to make sure that the public knows about this next upcoming meeting, where we could take input as we would. I think if members of the Board of Selectmen who aren't serving on the committee would be able to comment in the same way any member of the public attending would be able to comment. So that opens the door to a whole bunch of comment, but I think it might be a worthwhile use of our time. I don't know if my fellow committee person agrees.
I would agree. I'd ask Nick whether or not that constitutes a meeting, you know, but,
Well, we could have it as part of
Well, if
the
we treat them as
yeah.
members of the public, we wouldn't treat them as selectmen who get to talk more than members of the public.
I just don't know if 4 selectmen get together in a telephone booth if that's a meeting.
Well, if they don't act in their capacity as selectmen, they don't get a vote or anything.
Yeah.
Is it? Am
Well-
I understanding that right? I don't want to go astray here.
I guess my question would be, what would be the difference in that and just having a discussion at a meeting?
Well, it just moves us faster.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I'm looking to get this
Yeah, I don't think,
finalized.
I agree. But-
So, the trigger from my perspective for a meeting is when you have a quorum show up at another public meeting. And sometimes they can get away with that because it's not speaking on an item over which they're eventually going to have some control over.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you guys are going to be approving this or not, so, if the selectmen are gonna all show up, then, I would probably say, let's just notice it as a selectmen, full selectmen meeting. But, safer than sorry, I've seen it
Special
go.
meeting.
Yeah.
Want to be safer rather than sorry. So we'll consider it.
So it's
and
doable.
try to
Yeah,
decide.
let's see how quickly we can get
Okay.
something out to everyone, and then we'll see what time we have in order to maybe have something prior to the June meeting, and so that in the June
What-
meeting, we'll be in a position to.
So
deliver
what are
something.
the restrictions that we run into in just sending out paper and getting back comments and suggestions to our strategic plan?
Well, you gotta dig deeper into the statutory definitions of what a public meeting is. So, what I just described, a communication to a quorum of, something over which you're going to have jurisdiction, that's one. Another one, but that communication, is not limited to, the way it's defined under the law includes if you're sending electronic communications to a quorum, then that's still, it's the same concept. If you're communicating by email, sending comments back and forth on an item that's gonna appear on your agenda, the legislature has said through FOIA, no, we want you guys to do that in public. And that constitutes a meeting when you're sending those back and forth emails. So, yeah, is it more efficient to do it that way? Maybe, arguably, but, from a transparency perspective, that's what the law requires.
So,
So it's when you're sending
Mike-
emails to a quorum, unless it's just an email from Allison pushing out something related to notice, or you guys saying, hey, group, I can't make it, that's above board. But like any substantive comments,
all right.
There's no, again, if she sends out the draft for comment, she's just sending it out. What you're suggesting is we don't want comments back.
Correct.
We gotta wait for a meeting to have that. So
Correct.
my sense is under a worst-case scenario, we're talking about having this done in July versus June, rather than, falling short on some FOIA issue or something along those lines. I say that's kind of the worst-case scenario. For us, that's not a bad case. So I'd like to get it all done in June too, and we might be able to, but then I think if everyone looks at it immediately and really gets their thoughts together and we put some time to it on our next meeting, we might be able to get something done.
Yeah, in
So-
June, we'll be a quarter of the way through our term, so I think having our strategic plan sooner
Really
rather than
depressing,
later
David.
is a good idea.
But it's very true. Exactly right. So the better, And this I feel will be a very important item for us going forward. So this outlines what we're going to want to get done. Thank you. Thank you very much, Hillary. Cece?
Mika?
Yes, Andrea, I'm
May I
sorry.
just ask that at our annual town meeting, an update on the timing be presented to the townspeople with respects to the strategic plan?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, it is an item we were going to mention this. I was going to mention the strategic plan at that. So yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Our let's see, next agenda item is with regard to CCW in the master plan update. We have heard from both of our remaining candidates. They are reviewing the answers. They give an indication that we might get them sooner rather than later, which is a good thing, but they do have until the 24th of this month to respond to us, because we want to make sure we gave them enough time, after which we will be sending their responses to the Board of Selectmen along with our strategic plan for your consideration and review, so that we can talk about the particulars at our June meeting. So, and again, one of those same type of thing. Hopefully we can make a decision in the June meeting, and if not, we'll have to either have a special meeting and or go into July. Any questions, any comments in regard to that? Andrea?
No, Mika, thank you, that's clear.
You're welcome. Okay, requests. We have a couple of requests for use of town property. It's the next agenda item. This is one that every year this gets to David's point, we're talking about this already. Girl Scouts selling Girl Scout cookies during our elections. With the elections coming up, obviously, this pertains to current elections and as opposed to ours, but we need to consider that. There has been a request on that.
I'll make a motion to approve the Girl Scouts to sell Girl Scout cookies outside our polling location on election day.
I'll second.
Is there any
She beat
questions?
you to it, Maria.
That's okay.
We have competing Girl Scouts here.
As long as they bring tag along, I'm good with it. Any questions or comments? Take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. It passes unanimously. Thank you. And the second item is a request from resident Chris Westerfeld for a wedding on the town green.
Dirk Westerfeld.
Well, Dirk Westerfeld, who's getting married. Chris is the one who's holding the party.
I'll make a
Posting
motion.
it.
I'll make a motion to approve the request for a wedding on the town green gazebo on August 11th, 2024.
Second.
Any questions?
Yes. I am so appreciative of their family's interest in having their wedding on the town green, but I am seeking clarity after reading the document about this with respects to payment, financial costs associated with this. Because the way I read this application was that the applicant may be required to pay a fee of $60 per hour per staff member, but I don't see any detail about how many staff member, oh, maybe I missed information, but how many staff members would be required, what would the fee be? And the fee scheduled to reserve the use of town property only specifies Woodbridge School District and Amity civic or nonprofit boards, or Woodbridge nonprofit boards, none of which are individuals. So can you just help me to understand how this is even a legitimate consideration? What am I missing?
I know Karen's not here, but I will just say, Andrea, Karen and John DeMeo from RAC and Jeanette from Human Services have been meeting to update all of these types of applications that we have on hand. They're working on that now, so this is what is available on our town website but I did notice a resident wasn't necessarily listed. So this was what was given to him to fill out, because it's kind of all we have. And it is just a ceremony at the gazebo, like the actual wedding ceremony. And that's it. So a short period of time, my understanding.
Is there,
Okay, yeah, I do see that no food or alcohol or anything like that would be served, so that makes sense, Allison, but I just have like concerns, about the legitimacy of the application since the document has not yet been updated. So maybe our legal counsel can speak to that. I mean,
but just say, Andrew,
ultimately,
just,
I love that they wanna get married in town, that's wonderful, and I appreciate the interest, I just wanna make sure, you know, we're doing it right.
I want to make sure I understand what your concern and or your question is specifically pertains to. In essence, this is, it can be viewed as if this is not different than a permit for playing baseball on a field. It's a permit to use town property. And even the form indicates that the organizations or individuals wanting to hold an event on town property must fill out an application. All applications are online at the First Selectman's office during normal business office, et cetera. So I first want to just make sure I understand what your concern is, because it's something we do, it's something we've done, and I think from our perspective, what Allison's referring to is specifically the feeling that, similar to what you're expressing, that we need to clean this up a little bit.
Yeah, and Samika, I see it says organizations or individuals
Right.
wanting to hold an event. But then further down the page, maybe this is just specific to fees, but it only lists school districts, nonprofits, and not individuals. So that was the concern. And then my question was, are any staff required? And if so, are we generating a fee from this request or application should it move forward? And if so, what is that fee?
So can I ask a question, just in terms of, as a justice of the peace myself, I've married people in the gazebo.
Right.
No one's ever had an application. So it's a public park, essentially, and it's open from sunrise to sunset. And if me and 25 people want to go there and start playing Frisbee, we don't have to book it.
Correct.
If this individual wants to go and, you know, assuming that there's an unobstructed view of the quaint gazebo and they want to pose for pictures and have their ceremony, isn't it just public use of our public spaces, which doesn't even require this? If there's no need for, you know, they're not having 200 people, they're not trying to bring in chairs, they're not trying to have porta potties or need police or anything like that.
If there's chairs required, I think there's a clause here, upon approval, the applicant may be required to pay a fee of $60 per hour for a staff member.
Right,
But,
but if
you're-
they all
you're-
bring camp chairs and sit down,
Right,
probably
no,
fine.
I agree with you, and it is something that was brought up as an example.
Yeah.
You know, so, it's not, you know, as far as the fee is concerned, you know, Sheila's point's well taken in that I don't even think you pay a fee for a permit to use a field or anything along those lines, so we don't usually charge a fee for this. They're not having a party here.
Okay, so maybe that's why, so then maybe my quote-unquote concern is a non-issue because the fee schedule doesn't identify an individual.
I
If
think,
there's no fee associated, then that point is moot.
and I think it's worthwhile for us to consider the fact that we may want to correct that.
I'll just say too that our fees are generally when we have an out-of-pocket cost that we have to pay. We generally get reimbursed. And it generally centers around staff that have to come in, whether it's to clean up or to provide facilities or to direct traffic or for whatever reason.
Can I just add something?
Please.
So, I think also just having the process, yeah, it's not a real revenue maker for the town here. Maybe we could make a few more bucks here and there, but really, I mean, from my perspective, it's having this sort of a process is to protect the town from a liability standpoint. Sure, we can just go onto the park and start playing Frisbee, And there are certain statutory protections that we have, in terms of like governmental immunity for people who get hurt on our parks. But that gets a little fuzzier where we're allowing events, so to speak. And I know that's a gray term, but I mean, it's more than just playing Frisbee, these things, especially if, well, I mean, they're not having the reception there, so people aren't gonna be drinking. But basically, for my other towns, I wanna see people who are using town property for an event, A, have insurance, and B, I mean, we might not do it here, but in some of my other towns, we actually have them as part of this form that they sign. There's a little provision that's a hold harmless and indemnification, so if someone actually gets hurt, then, you know, we don't even have to worry about ever getting a claim on it, so.
And that's an excellent point, because some of this is through experience, where, you know, we had no process, and all of a sudden someone shows up with, you know, stuff or sound equipment, and, well, where are you gonna plug it in, and how these people, who's gonna do the well, we thought the buildings were open. Well, buildings aren't open, you know, there's always one thing leads to another. That's really where this came from.
So will there be staff required for this?
My understanding is no.
And if there is staff required, it says even upon approval, the applicant may be required to pay a fee of $60 per hour if we do need staff. So if it's approved, it doesn't necessarily indicate that there will be no dollars. If they change something that they're doing, or there's a requirement as a result of what they're doing, we can charge them for staff.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Would like to make a note to make sure we think about that indemnification.
Or maybe no,
Thank you.
we'll circle back to that. You do have a vote that has been first and seconded, so.
Any additional discussion and or questions? We'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
It passes unanimously. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the Neighborhood Assistance Act application. Receive and call for public hearing. This is it's a program under the Department of Revenue Services, and it's where businesses receive tax credits for donations to nonprofit agencies. Town receives the applications from the agencies. This is part of the process. We receive the application outlining the proposed project, and we hold a public hearing, and then we send those applications to the Department of Revenue Services. And it requires a motion for us to do this.
To set the public hearing?
To receive and, yes, exactly, exactly. To schedule the public hearing. So I'll open by making a motion to receive the applications for the 2024 Neighborhood Assistance Act program and schedule a public hearing for 6:30 p.m. Wednesday, June 12th, 2024, to receive comments on the Amity Teen Center doing business as incorporated, doing business as 10 Selden, application for $24,975 to be used for an energy efficient project. The Jewish Community Center of Greater New Haven, application for $150,000 to be used for energy efficient HVAC equipment restoration. And the Cure Rare Disease Incorporated, application for $150,000 to be used for advanced treatments for rare diseases.
Second.
Questions?
Mika, did you say June 12th or June 13th?
I thought I said June 12th. I'm reading June 12th.
Okay.
It is Wednesday, June 12th, 2024, which is at our Selectmen meeting.
Okay.
Any additional
Steve,
questions?
Did you second?
I did.
We'll take the vote. All in favor? Yeah? Aye. Thank you, Andrea. All right. Next on our agenda is appointments. It's with a heavy heart that I make an appointment to replace our late Dick Blackwell as a treasurer. Is the first.
I'll make a motion to appoint Matt Giglietti as town treasurer for a term ending on December 31st, 2025.
I'd like to second that.
Any discussions? I think everybody knows Matt, and I think it's a great choice, and hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Welcome back, Matt.
I'll note
Every time they.
Wasn't going long.
Everything I can't help, I couldn't resist myself.
Mika, I don't know that we need an additional note, but I want to note that this appointment also appoints Matt to the investment committee as town treasurer for a 2-year term ending on December 31st, 2025.
Thank you. Nick, do we need we don't need a motion and a vote on that, right? That's an appointment?
The treasurer serves.
Yeah, the treasurer serves on that.
Correct.
All right.
Just noting it for the record there.
We also have an appointment for the South Central Connecticut Regional Water District representative, who is currently Mark Levine. And so, I'm
Yep.
sorry.
Also, I'll make that motion to appoint Mark Levine to a 3-year term as Woodbridge's representative on the South Central Connecticut Regional Policy Board beginning on July 1, 2024 and ending June 30th, 2027.
I'll second that. Any questions? Comments? Take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously. And the next agenda item is our consent agenda. This is acknowledging the receipt of the town clerk's report, acknowledging the receipt of the prior Board of Selectmen meetings, 2 sets of meetings, regular meeting April 10th, 2024, and special meeting April 25th, 2024. We're also acknowledging the resignation of Nita Lathia from Sustainability. Do I have a
And ask for us
Do
to
I have a-
remove first.
Yes. Is there any request to remove any of those items from the consent agenda? Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Second. Are there any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Carries unanimously. Thank you. I've been to 10 Selden, which was formerly the Amity Teen Center, and they asked if there was something that we could do, or I could do as a Board of Selectmen, and/or the board could do to bring more attention to what they're doing, and just give them some light in terms of their activities, et cetera. One of the things I thought might be interesting is to have a meeting there. I thought it might be interesting to not have a meeting here, is really what it kind of comes down to. So I did tell them that I would think of that. We looked at the time that I spoke with them, which is back in the February timeframe. I told them we'd look in the June timeframe to do this. And I did obviously tell them at the time, and we reiterated to them again recently, that it really, really, really depends on what our agenda looks like. At this point, our agenda for June is starting to look pretty full, and it may go on for a while. So it was also suggested by some that we may want to look in this, may want to think about doing it in the summer. I understand they have very good air conditioning, so it might be an appropriate time to do it there where things are not as. I do feel like the June meeting is going to be a very important meeting for a number of different items. So I'm thinking we might want to do it, but I did want to make sure that the public was aware of it, but more importantly, the selectmen are aware of it, where this is coming from, because you probably might have seen it on the agenda and said, why? And I'd welcome an opportunity if you have any thoughts on this, if you think it's really just not something we should or could be doing, I'd welcome that. But my sense is that it's something I would like to do specifically for that group, and just to see how it works out. Any thoughts or?
Will they be able to broadcast from there?
Yes. As a matter of fact, we checked on it, and one of the people who works here for us also does there, so they know what equipment is there, they know what can be done, so it's something that we would be able to live stream. We'll be able to do what we do here. So, and it is large enough so that we can set up probably more chairs than we have here in case there are public attendees and things of that nature. So,
Can we have bands play
So-
afterwards?
A little concert afterwards wouldn't hurt, right?
Maybe we
That'd be fun.
get Tony to play.
Yeah.
There you go. So anyway, that's the thought behind it. And what I will say, based on our discussion today, is that our agenda will be a little full for June, so we won't do it for June, and we'll look at July as a possibility. All right. August is one of those months that I understand from a tradition standpoint, we sometimes don't have a meeting in August.
Correct.
So, and that may be the route we go again this year, so, all right. Any other thoughts on that? I believe that's.
Second.
Second?
6:59 PM, guys.
Yeah, it's still bright out, see, I brought the sunglasses, that's perfect.
So, thank you, everyone.